Good evening. Welcome to my Tiny Desk Talk. My name is Norris Manning, and I'm in the doctoral program at the University of Missouri, St. Louis. And I'm delighted to be on this journey this fall, starting out. And I'd like to talk a little bit about some topics that we covered in our class, building socially just educational communities. So when I think of the two terms diversity and social justice, I think diversity is a topic that I've been familiar with and experienced probably my entire time working in higher education. We have lots of training and workshops and sensitization kind of efforts and efforts to improve environments for many different kinds of students on campus. But I think the social justice term is something that I knew less about. We didn't talk about these things formally in classes when I was in graduate school a long time ago. So I was kind of interested and excited and a little nervous about exploring these topics as part of this class this semester. So the readings that we had assigned to us were very informative. We started with White Rage, and I think that was an eye-opening book for me. I have an interest in history and political science, and just learning things that were not taught to me during my high school or college career were very shocking to learn more details about those parts of history and the aftermath of the Civil War and the Civil Rights Movement in the United States. So these were horrible things that I did not know, and dealing with those things now is a little disconcerting. So, but I thought the book was really excellently written and exposed us to a lot of microhistory that were not taught. So by the end of that book, I was a little, I don't know, angry or disappointed in the educational system in the United States that I had experienced, and not really quite sure what to do next. But then we moved on to our readings for diversity and social justice, and that again was an eye-opening kind of experience that focused on oppression of different groups of people, and how they experienced the world different from me, and a lot about the negative impacts of oppression that last for lifetimes and for generations. And I think examining those concepts and those voices and learning about some next steps relating to race, gender, ethnicity, classism, ageism, sexism, and abilities was really kind of the crux of learning about social justice movements and working in social justice in a general way. So I think that with those two books in mind, part of what I learned about myself through reading those books and writing our reflection papers, I feel like I'm a lot more enlightened. I thought I was enlightened before, but I feel like I'm a lot more enlightened now, but I'm still burdened by my socialization and the different pressures in society, the different oppressions in society that exist for other people. There are biases and stereotypes which creep into my interactions with people, and sometimes I notice those, and sometimes I don't. So I keep working towards asking myself, in particular, which thoughts and my actions are related to bias and stereotypes that I continue to have as I work with students every day and work with faculty. And so I think that's pretty tough to examine that in oneself. I've also learned about myself that I'm defined by my race and my privilege. I approach the privilege piece with a little bit of concern, because I think privilege can be interpreted a lot of different ways or thought about it in a lot of different ways. I never thought of myself as really privileged because I was not from a wealthy family, and we didn't have powerful people in our family that held political office or held positions in large companies. So in my mind, privilege had always been kind of related to extreme amounts of wealth and extreme power. But through our readings, I learned more, and my reflections, I learned more that I am privileged, and that other people see me as privileged. And that has an impact on how I am perceived by others, um, and how seriously I'm taken in certain settings, I think. But there are things about my identity that other people can't see about my beyond my race and my privilege, my economic privilege. So I kind of toss those things around in my mind and think about those, but acknowledge that I am defined by my race and privilege. And my final thing that I kind of learned about myself through these readings are that I'm kind of influenced, well, I am influenced by the white race, the majority dominant race, and by male characteristics and culture. So those are things that I've become very sensitized to as I've read and reflected on the assignments for our course. So kind of more specifically how I've changed, I think I have more understanding about the process by which socialization continues to breed oppression for groups of people in the United States and around the world. Our readings focused on the United States, but I feel like I can see these things happening around the world with different immigration issues. I have a better understanding of the effects of oppression, that it's not just people not working hard or they're not doing more to help themselves. It's just that there are social and systematic barriers to them being able to have any amount of power, any amount of influence, any amount of control over their lives in lots of ways. I feel like I have more knowledge and sensitivity to issues regarding race, gender, class, religion, abilities, age than I had before. I think the readings has showed me that there are some things that I can still learn and be aware of as I move forward in my career. But at the same time, I've developed a lot of frustration and hopelessness about diversity and social justice in our country, in the United States, in particular in light of the current political and social climate. And you can see that just by watching the news every night. But I do have an interest in continuing to learn and to grow within this topic area. So after reflecting on what we've read and how I feel like what I've learned and how I've changed, I thought about what my journey forward is going to be. And I'd like to share some of that with you today. I know that I need to continue examining myself, to examine my own biases and perceptions, my actions and thoughts, and how they relate to other people. I know that I have to challenge myself to monitor my own privilege in my own situation, my own racial motivations as I move forward. The words I use, the actions I take, I need to be aware of what I'm doing to other people, what I'm saying to other people. And particularly one area that really wasn't touched on by our readings, and that's kind of intellectualism in nature. I know that educational attainment is related to a lot of factors, in particular financial support to earn a college degree, but I'm pretty snobby when it comes to people that may not have gone to college. So I have to remember that not everybody has the same opportunities, and I really can't judge them because of that, the fact that they didn't go to college. need to continue developing awarenesses of my own privilege and how that that I benefit from that privilege, and in positive and in negative ways. So there's lots of examination that I need to continue doing as I move forward. And part of that is acknowledging some barriers that I will admit to having. I'm very individualistic. I don't really rely on a lot of other people for things, and so I find it interesting that there are people that need that reliance on others, or depend on other people to succeed or to live. I think that I have a strong work ethic, and I'm surprised to see that other people may not have as a strong work ethic as I do. And I need to remind myself that is a barrier in my perception of how I view other people. Education is important to me. It's not important to everyone. And people are not interested in education beyond a certain level. And I know that that's a barrier in my ability to move forward in thinking about diversity and social justice. I feel like freedom and equality can conflict with each other, especially when the word fair enters into the conversation. And I need to be keenly aware of those kinds of concepts. Finally, I'm not really an activist. I'm reluctant to get actively involved in movements or causes. And I know that that holds me back and can be a point that other people judge me at. If I'm so interested in working to achieve social justice or to ensure diversity in settings, educational settings, I've got to work in certain ways, and other people may not view the ways that I work as valid. So I know that that's something that is a barrier to me moving forward. So I think continuing to examine myself is a step that I need to continue, and it's involved in relation to continuous education about oppression and oppressed peoples. Because I think oppression is a moving target. It changes over time. And I need to keep looking at my responses to other people, new populations of people, and how they experience oppression. And part of continuing to examine myself is continuing to gain more information. Knowledge is really important. And I gain knowledge in a lot of different ways, or gain information in a lot of different ways. And the first one is reading. A book I read a long time ago was called The Education of a Wasp by Lois Stalvey. And her dedication page, she dedicated the book to Malcolm X, who she paraphrases that he told white people to educate themselves. And reading her book, learning about her family's awakening to the realities of race in America and racism in the 1960s and 70s was very powerful to me. I remember it and have it to this day. And I think that's one thing that has really made me more interested in learning about things is that particular book. But I've identified some other books that I think I'm going to pursue reading in the next few months. One is called White Fragility by the author's last name is D'Angelo. There's another book called White Awake by someone named Hill is the last name. But I think that we also need to read other people, other viewpoints. There's a book I found called The Diversity Delusion by author named MacDonald, and just reading the short description of the book made me have some reactions, and I'm a little nervous about reading that book because I don't think it's going to be in line with what I believe. But it's still important to know those things, because without knowing those things, we really can't change society, knowing those other ideas. There's another book I found, Is Everyone Really Equal? By someone named Sensoy and D'Angelo. And then research journals are often a resource that I look to learn more about up-to-date information. I think I'll probably participate in more workshops at my university, discussions or conference sessions that are related to diversity and oppression and social justice. Staying active and learning what other people are doing or experiencing is one way to further my knowledge and skills. I really enjoy movies, TED Talks, YouTube, a lot of different music styles, art exhibits and festivals. I think those are ways to access different ideas and different cultures. And I think that's really important in working in diversity and social justice. And finally, just having conversations with other people, feeling comfortable talking about these issues, finding a trusted friend or colleague that is going to be supportive. To hear this white person talk about race, or to hear this man talk about sexism, is something that I'll be seeking out in the future. And I think all of those ways, reading, participating in workshops, in conferences, experiencing culture through movies and other forms of what we consider entertainment. Some of them are edutainment. And then talking to other people are ways that I'll continue to educate myself. And finally, I've thought about how I can engage. I mentioned before that I'm not much of an activist when it comes to anything much, really. And I thought how I can engage best for me, where I can, when I can, how I can. But I am resolved to explore those things. And I think one of my strong suits is working with people individually at the university and in small groups. And I'm pretty challenging when it comes to people and their interactions. I feel like I want to challenge them to examine their own biases, their own stereotypes that creep into work, their own barriers that they have to working towards a more inclusive and diverse and socially just environment for students, faculty, and staff. I feel like I can challenge them to educate themselves more by suggesting things to read or talking about things I've read, and how that may influence them to educate themselves on things. And then challenge them to engage in whatever way that they are comfortable, whether it's an individual change for themselves or to engage in change for the campus, or the broader society. I feel like I can be that kind of a supportive person informally when it comes to how I choose to engage or how I feel most comfortable engaging. Finally, some kind of really random thoughts right now. I found the video that we watched, the TED Talk on the danger of a single story, very enlightening. And that how that a single story is dangerous because it's an incomplete story. And I think I will always rely on that to encourage me to think about all sides of a situation and all sides of stories and all sides of people's lives as much as I can. Because I think that the awareness and knowledge are really crucial in creating a socially just world. And if we only understand one story, then we have a dangerous situation where we might make mistakes. Another random thought deals with something that I saw at a conference. I went to the Council on Adult and Experiential Learning conference in early November, and Stephen Brookfield, who works as a faculty at the University of St. Thomas in Minneapolis, St. Paul, had a line on his slide, one of his slides that talked, that was a quote or a concept from, I think, a German philosopher named Jürgen Habermas. And the words were this: adulthood begins when we cease to universalize our own experiences. Adulthood begins when we cease to universalize our own experiences. And I thought about that a little bit, and I thought about how this is related to oppression. And I think that this is essentially what oppression is about. It's about a dominant group trying to universalize their experience to the society. And that is a very dangerous thing to continue doing. It contains power and standardizes power within the grips of the dominant race, the dominant gender, the dominant religion, um, the abled people, a certain age group of people, and it really does restrict power and opportunities from other people if we continue to try to accept the universalization of one group's experience. Um, so that's something to kind of toss around in my own mind and think about a little bit more. And then finally, rights are not pie. Some people talk about if one group gains power, then another group is going to lose rights. I think about this in relation to gay people and demanding the right to marry, and how heterosexual couples and heterosexual society was saying that they would lose their rights if other people were given the same rights. But we have to stop looking at things in such a way that it's a piece of the pie that gets divided too much and everyone loses. I think that's a very selfish way to look at distribution of rights and opportunities within our country. So I told you those were some kind of random thoughts. So I'll just kind of leave those there for people to digest and think about. So I want to thank you for visiting my Tiny Desk Talk, and want to encourage everyone and myself to fight on in our own ways towards a more just